Okay.
I shouldn't even. The lost cause.
All right, good. So we're adding on listeners right now. There's a number zooming up here.
Literally.
They are.
We're a few
Yeah,
minutes.
we had I think right before showtime we were at like 240 some registrants, so it's all good. Okay, we are recording and we are live with our attendees. I'm going to just kick this off by saying thanks to our 6 editors for joining us here. And I take this in this time of national distress. I think the fact that we've got 6 Cleantech news site editors that have come together to join us is a sign of both the durability of this sector and I think the growth of the sector, that there's this robust set of trade publications here. So first, thank you for coming, and thanks for everybody who's signed on to listen to this. And I just wanted to start having you introduce yourselves. I guess we'll go in alphabetical order by last name, starting with you, Jan.
Pleasure to be here, Mike. Thanks for having me. I'm Jan Brandt. I'm the managing editor of solarwakeup.com.
And I am Heather Clancy, the editorial director at GreenBiz.
Catherine Morehouse. I'm a reporter and editor at Utility Dive.
Is it my turn? I'm Jen Runyon. I am the editor of Renewable Energy World as well as Power Grid International.
I'm Zachary Shahan. I'm CEO, director of Cleantech.
And I think Darius is still muted right now, so we'll count him as in. Darius Nickens is the editor and chief of Recharge. So thanks. I wanted to just kick this off by just doing a round robin with you all, and with this question: at the start of this year, what were the 3 major trends that you were keeping track of in the course of your reporting and editing? And Catherine, let me just start with you.
Sure. For us, in terms of, we had a huge Outlook series that we did that tracked trends across a bunch of sectors, but to kind of stick with the clean tech theme, I would say distributed energy resources, and then specifically looking at storage and how that will be deployed. And then for us, a big thing that we continue to look at with the rise of distributed energy resources and all of that is really the changes to business model. How will the utility model change as we move forward in this transition, and what are regulators looking at to incentivize utilities to really build out some of these clean tech products?
Catherine, I'm getting a couple of audience members asking you to speak up just a little bit since they're hanging on your every word.
Okay, I'll move closer. Yeah, so it was storage, distributed energy resources, and then storage specifically, and then we looked at rate design and really just utility business model reform and what that might look like in 2020. We saw a lot of movement in that direction in 2019, and we've been seeing a lot of those conversations happening. So really just trying to wrap our heads around and see what regulators and others are doing to really look at how.
All right, I think we might have lost Catherine here. Zach, let me ask you, before the pandemic hit, the 3 trends that you were paying attention to.
Oh, I thought it was coming later. Oh my gosh. The autonomous vehicles is one. It's a very exciting, potentially the biggest story of the first half of the century if it works, but it's still a bit of a question mark. So we're very curious in watching this topic. In general, the EV adoption, electric vehicle adoption, it's been growing fast for the past decade, but now it's hitting like a really fast growth curve, sort of like solar 5 5 years ago, wind 15 years ago, 10 years ago. So it's hitting that like really steep EV adoption curve, especially in Europe, where we're jumping quickly from 2 to 3% market share to 10, 15 percent market share. Norway 75% market share, and then solar power, wind power, battery storage price drops as they continue to drop, and sort of, you know, don't just disrupt new power capacity, but also start to disrupt existing power plants that might be retired early because of the low cost of solar, wind, batteries.
Jan, how about yourself?
Yeah, I mean, look, it's hard to pin it down to just three. You know, clearly the one thing that, from a solar specific standpoint, right away I wanted to track kind of the depth and duration of the impacts that are facing the installers. So we've been doing a weekly survey of the solar market. You know, not a scientific poll or anything, just trying to understand, you know, are people still buying solar? What are the issues impacting installers? What do the credit markets look like, to understand, is this a temporary with a quick recovery? Are there going to be some long-term effects? So the survey is definitely one. It's been really interesting to see the pollution. You know, you see these pictures from around the world, you know, from India to LA, kind of the impact of having no cars on the road. It's something that, just in theory, we've always been saying, but we could have never proven, because, you know, taking cars off the road for a week is not an exercise that we would have ever been allowed to have. The question is now that we know the real life effects, are we going to actually see changes in regulatory policy or legislation based on the fact that we now, you know, we know for a fact that cars make cities less livable? You know, and then, you know, at the end of the day, is, you know, how bad, you know, how much of the market are we going to lose if this crisis lasts long, right? So if residential solar installers, you know, can't survive this crisis, what does that mean for the market afterwards? You know, that's definitely something on the lookout for. You know, I'll add a fourth just because it's timely. It's interesting to see that EEI views this crisis as an opportunity. You know, and files, you know, trying to nationalize net metering policies, you know, through the FERC filing yesterday. So it'll be, you know, another interesting tack to see where else the attacks are coming from in a moment of crisis.
Heather, how about yourself?
So I'm gonna cheat a little bit and talk both as the editorial director and then also as the writer. I think of the things very much through the lens of climate tech. So we're really focused on what's going to really address the climate crisis the most quickly. So like from an overall standpoint, coming into the year, three of the biggest things for us were the whole zero emissions shipping and logistics movement, including fleet electrification, but also some of the other fuels that are playing a role in helping get to the hard to decarbonize sectors, like in shipping and in aviation. So biofuels and so forth, some of that stuff. Regenerative agriculture is a huge theme for us, and as is energy resilience, in generally speaking. So some of the things that have been previously mentioned, like microgrids, energy storage, and so forth, fit into that theme. So from a site level standpoint, if you had to pick three, that's really what GreenBiz was coming into the year. I personally am the green tech lady, and so I focus and coming into this year, I had a couple of category focuses. Ag tech, so have seen a resurgence in that, not just information technology, but the biotechnology parts of that. Carbon removal technology, I think, is something that is fascinating me at many different levels. It doesn't have to be huge. And then the sort of uber theme for me is how things like artificial intelligence and blockchain affect all areas of sustainability. So especially transparency in the supply chain. So that's sort of my three coverage areas that I've been focusing on.
Jennifer, how about you?
Yeah, thanks. So the one thing that renewable energy world was really interested and invested in getting the first offshore wind. We didn't invest, I said the wrong word, but we were paying very careful attention to offshore wind in the U.S. We are in the Northeast ourselves, and so behind me, my background is the Block Island Wind Farm, the one and only offshore wind farm in the U.S. I got to take a boat out there with GE and go around those turbines. It's fascinating. It's such a feat of engineering when you see those things out in the ocean generating. So I'm fully vested in watching that industry take off. We've got some really, really big offshore wind farms planned up and down the East Coast. We'll see if they go anywhere. One that looks like it was getting very, very close off of Martha's Vineyard got shut down. So not shut down, but they were delayed again. So we will see. So that's one thing that I'm always keeping my eye on is the growth of offshore wind. Another one, energy storage, of course. I mean, energy storage is everywhere. Renewables kind of caused it to come into play, and it's now exploding. And I'm talking everywhere from behind-the-meter batteries up to really giant storage facilities that are being installed along with solar, sometimes along with wind, but all up and down the whole utility or chain. And then the last thing is, distributed energy resources again, distributed solar in particular. My other background is these solar trees. Oh, I don't know if I can do it right now. There it goes. Solar trees at the Orlando Convention Center. So I'm really watching how utilities are starting to get involved in solar, either building it. We actually just had a story this week about Entergy building their own 100-megawatt solar array, which is the first time they're using a build transfer agreement. Really fascinating stuff. So I love watching distributed solar and large solar.
Great.
Those are my three.
And I'll just say to all of our attendees, if you've got questions for our panelists, begin putting them in the chat pane. We'll use that as our primary way to field questions. And we've also got, I think there's a feature in Zoom, you can answer a poll question, and we've got the background contest going. So which editor has the best background here? And Jennifer has reserved the right to vary her background because she's got one that she thinks is the killer. We all think it's the killer app, so we're a little concerned about her using it and win the contest. But Darius, the three things you were paying attention to coming into this year pre-pandemic.
Well, pre-pandemic, macro and micro, I suppose, from Recharge's standpoint. The energy transition, most widely an investment therein. So if you look at the fact that 9 of the last 10 years, we've actually seen clean energy, new build outpace that of fossil fuels. I think obviously overarched is our mission as an editorial title. And I think if you look at the most recent IRENA numbers, most recent IEA numbers, obviously that bears out the kind of magnitude of the shift we're seeing. And it's probably something we can pick up again as a theme when we move into discussion of the impacts of COVID-19 on the energy transition. Then on the micro, and it's not so micro at all, it's offshore wind. Certainly, I guess Recharge having been raised in Europe, although we have editors around the globe, we have a particular interest in offshore wind. And to think of an industry that's grown in footprint at the size it has, and now obviously it's being forecast to reach anything between 340 gigs to one teragig by mid-century. This is as big as it gets. I mean, this is civilization scale power production. So offshore wind is very much a focus for us as a trend. And then I think so obviously sort of weaving its way through that is the corporate renewable story. So if you look at, AWEA just put out some figures today that show 2019 was again another record-setting year for non-utility green energy purchasing. Obviously, Europe lags somewhat behind the U.S., but fundamentally we're seeing a lot of the heavy emitters now joining the party. So the Norsk Hydros, the Alcoas. This is a fundamental change, obviously moving from the IT giants into the so-called hard to abate segment. So I think those three things are those three things are sort of key to our mission.
Good. And we're starting to get some questions from the panelists, so I'll try to shorten my question list a fair amount here. But I think here's the fundamental question that I think are on the minds of many of the people in clean energy is, how is this current double whammy of pandemic and recession, how is it going to affect the sectors you cover? And so perhaps the way to get that, to get your thoughts on that, is to ask this question: good or bad, how do you think the sectors you cover emerge from this? Best you can tell, sitting right now with all the uncertainty that we have. And I'll just, let you unmute yourself and give some answers. Maybe Heather, you want to go first?
Everyone else can think. So bad. Bad, I think it will affect the commitments in the aviation and hospitality industries. I think it will have a significant amount of pressure, because I think those organizations in those sectors are going to have a harder time supporting internally some of their goals. Their aviation goals were pretty big at the beginning of the year, but we don't know what's going to happen now with that industry virtually, completely grounded. I think it's going to be very good for strategies around sustainable food supplies. I think that it's going to cause a rethinking and a focus on the supply chain there, and new forms of distribution and new alternatives of distribution. I think if you think about an investment standpoint, I believe that those focused on delivering food to people, and it's going to probably help the urban agriculture movement as people think about having better local supplies. I could go on, and I probably will pop in later, but I'll just leave it there, because there's a lot of people on this call that I'd rather hear talk. So.
Yeah, and you were doing, for a while, on your publication, you were doing kind of a rolling survey of feedback from the solar market. Where do you think the zeitgeist of the feedback that you got, where did that come down?
And we're running it again. We ran it for 4 weeks, took a week off, and now it's back up for responses again this week. Here the general trend is that the consumer is still buying, albeit at a lower amount. And there are two fundamental issues, sort of bad issues, that could become good long-term if they survive the crisis and become part of the overall kind of residential solar market. And one is the door-to-door sale is gone, and is going to be gone for the foreseeable future. How fast does Zoom become a comfortable way for both salesperson and consumer to feel the trust relationship build and continue that sale to happen, right? Every traditional, the retail environment, the Home Depot, the Costco, all those channels are gone, right? And there are companies that had thousands of door-to-door sales or retail salespeople. Those are effectively overnight rendered, I don't want to say worthless, but that's not an appropriate channel anymore. The flip side, this is the good, is if the sale in a virtual environment, i.e. the consumer gets comfortable buying through this environment, a salesperson can now meet 2 or 3 times as many potential customers as they could when they were driving around trying to meet with people in person. So the acquisition cost can drop, and it can open up the opportunity for the salesperson to not live in the state where the market exists. So remote work in this environment can actually be another possible. I also think that there's going to be a diversity positive here. I've talked to many solar installers that just don't feel comfortable sending female sales force into people's homes. And, they're saying now in a virtual environment, that may open up the opportunity for more diversity, which will be interesting to see how that plays out. The other one, this is probably the biggest pain point for the industry today, is building departments are closed. 50% of them are not giving permits, period. The other 50% are trying to do it through email, but these are people that are used to paper and pencil and raised stamps. They're not digitally advanced, but they're trying to learn. There's some NREL, solar app, they're working on these issues. The bigger problem we have today is that there are no inspections. Less than 10% of building departments are doing any form of inspections. And, there are millions of dollars of unbilled invoices from installers to homeowners to finance companies because they can't get the inspections complete. If the industry can get to a remote inspection system where they don't have to sit on a rooftop waiting for a day for the inspector to show up, that will instant permit and remote inspections has the opportunity to lower residential solar cost by $1 a watt or more. And really bad right now. This is an opportunity for us to change it. And there are definitely a lot of people trying, but it's a major pain point today.
Catherine, I wanted to ask you what you're seeing. How do you predict the utility industry will come out the backside of this? I mean, it's a little bit more recession-proof for sure than other sectors.
Right. Well, it's interesting with the utility industry because one really big trend has been one thing that groups have been watching really closely is whether utilities are being accepting of people not being able to pay their power bills and making sure that utilities aren't turning off power to people who can't pay their bills, because obviously that's a really difficult thing for people to do right now, and it's there's a whole equity question there. So some groups have been tracking that really closely, and we've been looking at that. And then on the flip side, we're starting to see some regulators step in and say, okay, we're going to have to start looking at what this is going to cost utilities to essentially give people a pass on their bills. And those are in preliminary stages right now, but it will be interesting to see what regulators find and how much of a pass they get, how much utilities are going to argue that they are losing on this, how much they're actually losing on this. And just, we're definitely going to keep a close eye on those rate proceedings to see how that plays out. Sorry, you're muted.
Sorry, in no particular order, Jennifer, Zach, Darius, if you had to make a prediction how the sectors come out on the backside, what would you?
I'll jump in if you like, Mike. I mean, I think fundamentally, every sector takes a heavy hit right now. Supply chains are disrupted, but we're already seeing very rapid bounce back starting from China carrying forward into Europe now. The fundamentals are that, when benchmark WTI was at $60 a barrel and had an IRR of 20%, wind and solar couldn't compete with 5-10% payback. But now it's up $20 a barrel and oil price volatility likely to become the new norm. There's a sizable industrial opportunity here represented by utility scale renewables. And of course, there's the overlying strategic importance of clean energy generation. That's all incontrovertible. So I think, there will be a bounce back in crude markets, but it's probably going to be something like a dead cat bounce, or at least a badly injured cat bounce. And fundamentally, the vice of shareholder government and public pressure on the petro giants globally is going to continue to tighten. We saw Shell's announcement this week, which of course is viewed from two very different angles, whether it was a welcome new trajectory or whether it was greenwash is obviously to be determined. But consider the big oil is only spending 0.8% of its total capital right now on renewables. There's a huge amount of headroom there. So renewables, again, 75% of new plant built last year was renewables. That is going to continue. Speak to Fatih Birol. He's saying you need to firewall economies with renewables. The European Green New Deal is going to be rooted in renewables. There's hope, obviously, in the U.S. that the next wave of stimulus funding goes into infrastructure which supports wind and solar in a way the first wave did not. So, I think probably the bigger argument is, are we seeing the end of the neoliberalist project here, right? I mean, can we return to a free market self-regulation? Can we return to a notion of sustained economic growth being an engine for human progress? Austerity guided governments like in the UK, the foundations have been rent asunder here. Big states back, and how do we change this planet with renewables finally?
I think it's a little unfair. Darius has exclusive information, being a celestial being and all. You know, I don't think it's fair to have a celestial being on this discussion platform.
Hey, now listen, Mike told me to choose a dramatic backdrop. That's all. This is the best I could find. There are wind turbines back there.
Yeah, that was very pretty. I have three quick ones. I mean, one, there's a lot of research that shows disruptive technologies, disruptive trends come out of a crisis better than they went into it. So the disruption just sort of accelerates. I think we're going to see that. I think we're seeing that with electric vehicles. I assume we'll see it with solar and wind. I think there's a push and pull. I mean, EV sales are not as good as they would be, for example, but auto sales overall have just dropped off a cliff, whereas EV sales are still up in a lot of markets, growing in a lot of markets. And when they're down not nearly as much as the overall auto market. And I think that's just going to continue to be the case. Another thing is, I think I hope, maybe this is optimistic, but I think and hope that people see the benefits of clean air, see the potential of clean air. I mean, just the pictures of Los Angeles today versus any other day in our lifetimes, I think are really dramatic. They have a really big effect, I assume, and I hope, on people outside of our kind of world. So I think that should help people to see the benefit. Also, on the flip side of that, there's been research that shows air pollution has a negative correlation with COVID cases. There's severity and deaths and all that. So, you know, when you live in a place with a lot more air pollution, you're more susceptible to respiratory diseases like COVID-19. So I think that should be impacting people a bit. I don't know how much, but hopefully a lot, just to help clean our air quicker, sooner. And the third one is just telecommuting. This is, you know, sort of a topic that's been around for forever, decades. But I think it's got its 15 minutes of fame, and we're going to see if that carries forward to a lot more telecommuting going forward as well. I think it should. I think once people get into I mean, I've been telecommuting for a decade. I think many of us here have been telecommuting a lot. So I think once people get in a habit and sort of learn a routine and learn how they can be efficient with it, a lot more people are just going to do it beyond this crisis. So I think that's going to cut a lot of emissions.
Yeah, Zach, it's interesting. David Wolf, one of our registrants, he asked a similar question there. But Jennifer, now that you've added yourself as the top toilet paper hoarder, you get the last word on this question. Then we'll go to the attendees' questions.
Still? Oh, there we go. Yes, thank you for that. So a lot of what I was thinking has been said. I agree with Zach quite a bit on, I think people are seeing the benefits of cleaner air and realizing that they can do a lot from home. I think people will carefully consider using their cars, I'm hoping. Bad on the sustainability side, I'm seeing a lot of the growth and the momentum that we've had for the past decade kind of just fly out the window. You know, my supermarket is forcing everybody to use plastic bags again. And yeah, there's a lot of things that I think people are going back to what they know and what's easy and what they think is sanitary. And that's a little concerning to me for sure. The other thing that I think that no one has brought up, and I don't know if it's a reality, but I'm seeing a lot of lobbying for a big clean energy stimulus package to help get the economy going again. We certainly got that in 2008-9 under Obama, but we have a very different federal government in the US, so we will see if that's even a possibility. I think certain states like New York and California sure will consider those as very, very viable ways to keep the economy growing, kickstart it again once we get beyond this. And so I've got some hope there that may come out of this whole thing too.
Jennifer, I think that's a good question, and it leads into a question that we got before the session from somebody who wrote in to ask, what do the panelists here think that odds are that the solar and the wind industry are going to get their extended tax relief in another stimulus bill? Not to drag us into too much legislative sausage making, but there's a fair amount of interest in that on the question string. Any thoughts on how we'll end up faring when, you know, the next stimulus bill?
I mean, I'm very curious to hear what other people have to say. I think, as I said, I'm seeing a lot of lobbying happening. I'm getting a lot of releases about these coalitions coming together and really trying to get that stimulus package that we need. It certainly makes sense to extend the tax credits a little bit because this year is looking like it's going to be severely impacted by this pandemic. But I don't know. What do other people think?
I have done some reporting on this, and it is interesting because every time you talk to the clean energy industry, it's very much, you know, what they need is very straightforward in a lot of ways, and some of just these deadline extensions and just reframing what these tax credits look like really won't cost the federal government any money. But I think it's a question of politics that unfortunately was soured early on. I mean, we saw, I don't remember how long this was because I have no sense of time, but Nancy Pelosi had actually proposed her kind of the January infrastructure package, which included so much of the green infrastructure that that you're talking about, but then, you know, backed off on that because of political pressure. And it's such a moment where people, I think politicians are trying to figure out what they can get done. And now there's this whole narrative of, well, Democrats are pushing the Green New Deal. So I think I've heard from some who are worried that that might have soured things a little bit. And I think a lot of people hope that's not the case, but that's kind of where my last reporting has left me at. And I definitely have questions over what will happen.
I have more confidence in state level policies helping with this. You've seen a lot of really good progress. I mean, Virginia, that bill got signed this week. I think a lot of the larger companies that have been investing in renewable energy, like the Amazons and the Googles and the Microsofts, they're putting their focus on the state level policies and how those could help support their investments. So I think maybe that's where I'm looking for more potential progress.
I'll add here one thing that backs up something that Jan had talked about, what he's picking up. Friend of mine, Gary Wicca, who's with LG Solar, has got a LinkedIn post that talks about new numbers that LG has out of some Harris research that they conducted that shows that they've had an increase in the amount of inquiries and the level of interest from parents in households of $100,000 and up in solar. And they're finding that quite interesting. So while the installers are all struggling as small businesses, it seems as though there's a fair amount of interest that's sustained. So kind of worth noting. There's Marvin Woods had a very interesting question here. He asked, won't utilities be forced to pursue the transportation market, or is that wishful thinking? I know many of you are following EVs. Your thoughts on utilities being more proactive in their involvement in EVs?
Is this a question of like, because of lost demand, will they be hoping to, you know, spur more demand in electric vehicles? Is that kind of the?
I think so. Marvin, you might want to just chat in here, but that's, I think, his questions. And I think he's essentially asking about the intersection of utilities, this recession, and EVs.
That's definitely an interesting question. I haven't thought of that particular angle. You're definitely seeing, of course, a reduction in demand for power from utilities. And I think utilities have long seen, I think in a longer lens, that trend has been something utilities have been looking at, and utilities have long seen electric vehicles as a way to kind of mitigate that loss. And I think that's a really interesting question to explore, is now that we are seeing that trend really accelerate, especially across utilities that are really relying on commercial and industrial loads, I think that's an interesting question, and we haven't explored it, but it's certainly in a longer form, a trend that is driving that for utilities. So I think it's a plausible thing to say.
Yeah, oh, Heather's got a hand. Oh,
Yeah, oh, yeah. I was just going to say that definitely the companies are pushing the utilities that way. I mean, National Grid is working with a lot of kind of corporate level clients to customers to try to figure out what their EV charging infrastructure is going to be like. They have to definitely look at the load. I mean, there's a lot of planning that needs to go. If you, I mean, look at how many, what is it, 100,000 vehicles that Amazon's got on order. I mean, and I think it's reasonable to assume that maybe they'll be postponed, but they're still committed to that. And they're going to have to find that charging infrastructure. So absolutely, even if it's not public, you see a lot of activity from the businesses and trying to help utilities support those services.
yeah, I was going to start with the same thing Catherine mentioned about this has been a long-term movement. I think they sort of needed some time to see that it was really happening. You know, they're obviously a cautious industry, but I think it's become clear this is the future, and they want this to be the future. And so they've been getting a lot more active in promoting it from what I've seen, and that should increase. I think one of the interesting things for me is you have home charge. A lot of people have home charging with an electric vehicle, so you don't have to go to a gas station and touch that nozzle that a lot of other people touch to fill up your car. So there's a kind of benefit, you know, on the sanitation side, you know, the avoiding germs, viruses side for that. Most people, like over 90% of EV drivers still charge at home. I'm one of the ones who doesn't. I don't have home charging, so I go to a charging station. But that's still, there's not like it's not a quick in and out. You know, you can get a glove or a bag, unplug the charger, plug it in easily without a rush, and it's a better process for that kind of thing. But I think that's just in general a trend that's been happening, and utilities are going to keep looking at that as an opportunity for them as well.
I could chip in here that Vattenfall today, Swedish utility, signed a deal with Hyundai, if anyone saw it, where they're actually going to collaborate on delivering charging boxes to homes and premises. So, you know, building that infrastructure into the stay-at-home world, you know.
And Peter Molinaro asked us, how much attention are you paying to the movement to decarbonize supply chains? Is that, you know, that seems like it's a little bit of a found money proposition for Fortune 500 companies that have decarbonization goals, chief sustainability officers for large cities or counties or states that also have them. It seems as though that's something they can do during the current shutdown. But any thoughts on that, or anything you've been following in your respective publications?
I mean, it's Jen. So can you hear me? The only story that I remember picking up on that was about Apple trying to decarbonize in China, some of its suppliers, and helping them decarbonize with some money. I have not seen anything other than that, and that was probably a couple of years ago that we reported on that. So
I don't want to monopolize the conversation, but yeah, actually there is some Microsoft. This is part of Microsoft's new goal that they announced in January. Absolutely, they need to address that part of their supply of their footprint and it's also an Amazon's commitment. So the answer is, yeah, I do see that this is a focus moving forward. It is the place where most of these companies have their emissions, and if they want to make these claims, they have to go and address it. Apple, to your point, Jennifer, has done a lot on that front, and they've actually invested and put money towards those projects in China and in other places. IKEA is another one, I think, that's in Europe, has done a bunch of work on this. I was speaking to a couple of CSOs in the last couple of weeks. Even though people aren't saying a lot publicly about sustainability, there's a lot going on behind the scenes, and I'm confident that there's good strategy still taking place. And basically, they're pushing forward with a lot of the things that they're doing. They're saying they're having a lot of conversations with their partners right now, and everyone's kind of like rallying together, right? The good news is that they're having different levels of sort of empathetic conversations with all the partners right now, and so maybe there will be some stuff coming out of this that's pushes the momentum a little bit forward.
We had a question from Kristen with Next Tracker. She said, "What are the panelists seeing how wind and solar technology companies are adapting to increased weather events, storage, more devastating effects such as harsher hurricanes hitting Florida, et cetera. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, it's a timely topic. PG&E was shutting off power in Marin County over the last couple of weeks because they're doing wildfire preparation work, right? So you've got tens of thousands of people working from home, and PG&E doesn't have the wherewithal to realize now's not the time to play with distribution networks. But that's the reality, right? That's one of the reasons that the solar industry in California is considered essential. We're coming up on wildfire season here in California. We're coming up on hurricane season in Florida. Storage attachment rates on solar are higher than they've ever been before. And the whole notion of self-reliance, right, is there's this ongoing trend where I'm better off just making sure that I can fend for myself for a variety of different things that I need in my life. And solar plus storage happens to be one of them. But to go back to an earlier point around really EVs and utilities, there's this overnight effect that's going to happen in utility load systems. If tens of millions of people or even millions of people stop going to offices and start working from home, stop driving on roads, move to one car, there's all these fundamental societal shifts that are going to happen that we have no idea how that's going to impact. EVs for a long while was, okay, utilities need to put charging networks at commercial properties. Well, if people aren't driving to commercial properties anymore, that's where we're assuming the daytime load is going to be, not in people's homes. How all of that is going to affect the utility networks, that potentially is going to have a dramatic impact, right? And it kind of shifts everything that, we thought things were going in one direction, i.e. people driving into cities. Now there's, I have my wife's uncle just moved to rural Wyoming, and he said his real estate prices are going through the roof and the realtor's getting nonstop calls for people that want to live in Wyoming. I don't think that that's a fad, right? There are people that now they can remote work. They're leaving the cities. They don't want to have to deal with any of this stuff.
Okay. Go ahead, Darius.
Well, I was only just going to chip in that one of the less discussed sort of cost elements to wind and solar construction is the insurance. Is the insurance involved? And with extreme weather and extreme weather events, from the figures we've been given, 20 to 40% increase in a lot of the insurance costs for these projects, which is just being treated as a correction in the market. The insurance rates were too low for too long. But but fundamentally, that's something that's obviously only going to increase in its impact on these projects. And as someone said to me at one point, an insurer said, ultimately, insurance companies they can pull the eject lever on any project, and if you can't get insurance, it doesn't get built. So this is it's a point that's as I say, is not under discussed, but no less germane. Okay,
so if I don't ask this question, I'm going to have a lot of irritated listeners here, because it's one that we heard in the run-up to this, and we got a couple of people in the chat pane. So many of the folks attending this want to know, in this environment, how do they get your attention as editors? There's a lot of companies out there, they want your time and attention. So I suppose perhaps it's a two-part question. One, are there some do's and don'ts that they should know about? And I suppose the related question is, what words of advice do you have for Cleantech communicators on how we can raise our game and how we interact with you all? So my sense is I won't have any problems getting participation on this question. So I'll leave it.
I have a lot of thoughts on this.
I do too, so go ahead.
And Catherine, I'm getting a couple of folks saying they just want to remind you to make sure you're talking close to the microphone.
Okay, is that good?
Yep.
Okay. I would say we get a lot of pitches, and pitches are great, but I think that sometimes there is a disconnect between, you know, what's relevant to us. And I think this is the best way for PR professionals to connect with a publication like ours, which frankly, like from my perspective, I am the one who is like shut down anything promotional, shut it down, won't even look at the email kind of thing. So I'm definitely the most intense about that on the team probably. But there's a good reason for that, and it's because, you know, we want to keep our reputation, we want to keep our journalistic integrity, all that. So with that being said, I would recommend that PR professionals, when they reach out to us, think of ways that you can be relevant. And I think the best way to do that is you all have experts on your team, right? You all have people who know much more about really niche parts of the industry than anyone on my team, certainly me, have been in the industry for longer. And we're always looking for sources. So I think those kind of pitches, if you will, where you're offering an expert and saying, you know, but not just saying, hey, this person can speak to the energy transition, because hey, so can everyone. Sorry, that's not that's not going to get my attention. You know, tying it to something relevant and saying, this is something that my expert can contribute to your coverage, and that kind of is much better than just saying, hey, we're a really great company, you should cover us, because we're just never gonna pick up, we're never gonna respond to that email. To be frank.
Yeah, I can absolutely add to that. I mean, you know, don't pitch me a product. I'm never going to cover just a standalone product, an upgrade, a new software. That's just not a story. You got to think of what the story is. I mean, we're all busy. We have 10,000 emails that we get every day. I want to know what you think is the story, and tell me the story, and then let me decide if it's something that I think the rest of the world needs to hear too. I guess that's all I really got. Yeah, those two things.
If I could offer a view, it was a discussion we had today with several of the editors across the titles within our group, talking around what they see as one of the great disruptions of COVID-19 actually is in the communications industry, and that is to say, you know, any CEO, any CTO with LinkedIn account can be his own PR machine now. And I get a lot of emails from PR, especially external PRs, who are sweating it because their viability, there's a kind of obsolescence that is felt, you know, breathing hot and heavy on their neck right now. So I think, without sounding, and a lot we're saying, of course, that's terribly self-important, you know, and I don't ever want to come off that way. And we need PRs to come to us. You know, we're a small team. We need the industry to come to us, oftentimes tell us what, you know, what's important, where, you know, how the trends are shaping up. The experts out there are fundamental to our intelligence. So I don't want to sound otherwise, but I do think that we are going to see a seismic shift here in the way that external communications industries have to earn their crust. So, you know, I would obviously echo what's been said before, that look, don't come to me as a generalist saying, you know, we have someone who can speak about the energy transition. That's not a great value to us. Think about contextual intelligence. You know, if you're a turbine maker, you know, and you have a story about a new technology, does this change you as a turbine maker in some way? Does it change the wind industry in some way? Does it change the energy transition in some way? So these kind of concentric circles of relevance, I think, are what are most important. It's really what we fundamentally try to do ourselves for our readership. But as I say, I think that, you know, we're going to see disruption, you know, multifaceted disruption coming with COVID-19, and one aspect of that is going to be where we source our news from. I get a lot more off LinkedIn and Twitter feeds now than I did a year or 2 or 3 ago.
I would add to this, one of the things that I think all of our sites being very specifically focused on a different audience, read my site.
Yeah.
Understand who my audience is. I get so much, I get so many pitches that are so general that I just kind of like, do you really understand my audience? So number one is read my site. Number two, I do strongly believe in relationships. I don't have quite the same level of, I mean, I get a lot of email as well, but I actually, I'm kind of in the working girl school of, I like looking at lots of different things, and I like seeing a lot of the press releases. I'm not going to cover them, but I like to see them because it helps me understand what's going on. And so I do a lot of sort of scanning and reading and so forth, and I put those together into trends that fit my audience. Right now, our focus isn't really that different from beginning of the year as far as our coverage, but we are absolutely putting this pandemic into the eyes of our audience, and that's what we're trying to translate right now. So that's, so I think that was part of your question, is what did your coverage shift? Not really, like not our areas of coverage, not our audience, but we're trying to translate what's going on for them.
Simon, the Cleantech here. I have to be honest, I am horrible these days at even seeing email. I used to be on top of everything, didn't miss a thing. These days I miss the majority of things. So it really comes down to what people have said. Don't send fluff, don't send generic stuff. That's just going to be passed over before I even get past the first or second word. In my preference, just nothing extraneous, just jump straight to the point, and especially highlighting relevant statistics or facts, numbers. I don't want vague sentences about this or that I've heard 100,000 times. I want to see like the stats, the facts, what's different. So someone mentioned, how does this change the industry? And don't try to butter me up. I don't really care about being buttered up. I just want to see whether something is worth covering or not. And it's hard. It's hard to get people's attention. It's harder today than it was 5 years ago, I'm sure, because these are a lot bigger industries than they used to be. But I just jump straight to the point and be real, be like normal, and I hugely echo, read the site, like know who you're emailing, tie it to us in some way so that we know that you didn't just, that you know who you're talking to. That helps too.
Yeah, I mean, look, I come at it from a little bit different perspective. I don't write, I cover the coverage, right? And so it's amazing to me when people want me, they write to me as if I'm going to write an article. The ones that are successful, getting into the newsletter, they'll say, they say, hey, Heather from GreenBiz is covering this. Here's the link to the story. And this is what we're trying, shape my opinion of what I'm thinking when I'm reading that article, so that, because that's what's going to get sort of the second level visibility. My pet peeve by a long shot, and sorry for all the PR people that, think that they get too many emails. If you don't subscribe to my newsletter and then want to be in the newsletter, or subscribe and then unsubscribe because you're getting too much email, you're going to have a hard, we all see who's subscribing and who's unsubscribing. Not that I want to be petty about this, but if you can't handle one email a day, that I have to spend 10 times as much time writing as opposed to you reading it and deleting it, give me a break, right? So, but the best pitches I get are, hey, this is what we got covered in this article. What do you think? Do you need any extra questions about it? And it goes back to Heather's point. Read the site, read the newsletter, understand what it is that we're trying to do. And you've got a much better shot. And then really build a relationship. I mean, most of the PR folks, I've hired, on my professional side, I've hired some of the folks that I saw do a good job, right? And I mean, it's really not that complicated at the end of the day. If you do this shotgun approach and try to get everyone to cover something really vague, you're going to get very few people. Go for the one person to get the one story and the one point out, and you're going to get much better, perspective there.
Jennifer, did you, or have you any thoughts on this?
I did. I thought of my last point that I forgot when I was speaking before, but don't get discouraged if we don't answer you right away. I mean, we are so busy, and if you really do have a good story, I'm fine with you continually emailing me, put it back at the top of my inbox. I am okay with that, and I know people feel like they're being a real pain. Believe me, I can easily delete it if I don't care about it. But if you really believe you've got a great story, then I could just be super busy that day, be writing and not paying attention to email and miss it. And so it's good to keep coming back.
You know, it's interesting to hear all of you say this. There's a cottage industry of about 30 some consultants or firms that coach people like me, the owners of creative services firms. And the one who is the most data driven, a guy named David Baker, he has this saying, no one's reading your newsletter. And really what he means is the more you're talking about your own company and the less you're communicating an insight to the outside world, the more you're just fading into the noise of the 90% of content clutter. So he's really big on separating insight from content. And one of the things that I wrote about a while back was the great conundrum in clean tech is that there's no clean tech company that succeeds without having a considerable amount of internal expertise, analytical expertise. But it's surprising to me how many of our clients struggle to mandate an internal expert to turn his or her expertise to externally produced insights that actually say something to the market does not know. So all these people have this wisdom and these insights in their brains, but it rarely comes to all of you. So it was interesting hearing experience. We are 1 minute out here from close, and I just want to let all of our listeners know that we have the poll open on the background. We definitely want you to participate. We're all afraid that Jennifer's going to run away with it, but you know Heather's got a. Jan got on with he's doing some play for sure, and Zach's being bohemian, and we've got Heather out in the field. So and then there's Celestial Darius. So we.
I forgot to add my real background. I'll see if we get in on time. But I'll just say thank you. I mean, I love being on a discussion like this where I agree 100% with everything everyone said. So I love an echo chamber. It's really nice. But it really, like, everything people said was really wonderful and smart. And I think really a tremendous panel. I don't like to join too many things because it takes a lot of time, but this was a no pass situation. Just tremendous cast here, great moderator. Yeah, this is my real background. I forgot to put this up. This should have won, right? No, I would vote for the toilet paper or Solyndra made me smile. I don't know why you have it up, but it made me smile like 5 times.
I mean, we're getting to the end, and I'm trying to make a point here because we talked about politics in the middle of it, and I didn't want to go on a rant during, so I stayed out of it. If you miss 100% of the pitches, you don't make. So when I read 13 straight oil industry is suffering and needs $500 billion from the administration and Axios in a row before there's one solar story, right? That's not Axios's fault, or it has to do with the content that's being delivered to the reporters, right? You have to generate news, good or bad, right? You don't have to paint a rosy picture right now. And, we have to be, until ACOR published the jobs report this week, we've largely heard nothing about the pains that clean energy is going through because, we want to be this, we can make it through anything industry. And that's been really frustrating to me as someone that's trying to sort of both cover what's going on, covering the headlines and shape opinions. So you have to make the pitches and you have to be real about the impacts. And so this is the point I'm trying to make, right? Solyndra was $500 million and Romney was the guy that's like, I hate solar 2012. This is the guy, he voted to impeach, right? This is the most moderate Republican in DC today. And it kind of shapes where we're at in just politics, right? $500 million is absolutely nothing. We just passed a $2 trillion stimulus bill and another 2 trillion's coming and another 2 trillion's coming. Frame your pitches accordingly.
Well,
Hear, hear.
we're not going to get even close to getting to the questions here. This has been tremendously fun, and perhaps we should do this again in a couple of months here because there's clearly it didn't take much to get past 200 registrants, and you all have been great. And Zachary, I just want to be clear to the listeners that in this conspiratorial age, there's absolutely no cash flow coming from me to you for you to pick this background. So I think what you're really trying to do is just start rumors, and I just want to knock those down. So just
I just was trying to think of the best background I could think of. That's
if I'm what passes for your best background, my friend, you need an imagination class.
If you had the picture of Mike in one wheel outfit, that would have won.
I couldn't find any scandalous pictures, unfortunately. Only this.
It's middle-aged, boring guy. Editors, thank you. Audience, thank you. This has been tremendously fun, really informative, and we will definitely be posting a link to this recording. We're going to be doing several pieces out of this with video snippets, and we're really grateful to you. So thank you, Cleantechers. Be safe, and we want to thank Sarah Hawthorne, who is listening from the UK. Thanked us all for being on. In fact, we're clear the UK is still shut down because it's 9 o'clock that night there, or 8 o'clock, and she's not at a pub. So that's pretty clear. Thank you. Stay safe, stay healthy. We will look to reconvene this perhaps in a little bit. So thanks so much.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Bye now.
Bye, everyone.